Hello and welcome to this week's Taking Care of Business. This week I'm joined by Jess Stephenson. Hello.
Wow, full name.
Yeah. This week we're going to be talking about data in the market. We're going to put a twist on the data this month and talk about how sales progression has an influence in terms of the data. Can you briefly, 30-second synopsis on what sales progression is, what you guys do?
A bit of it, I feel, is quite a bit of project management and navigating the process and hopefully making it an enjoyable experience. If a financial and emotional transaction can ever be enjoyable, then we'll try and do that.
We saw 178 billion dirhams worth of property value transacted.
Wow, some very busy sales progression team.
How easy is it to resale off-plan units?
Yeah, it's pretty easy, to be honest. Because it's remote POA, 87% of people that give a POA that we've done over the last 6 months weren't even here. I mean, why waste a day when you can be on the beach?
Yeah, so maybe it might be out of place for me to say, but if the banks could maybe follow suit and allow remote bank account opening, then somebody wouldn't have to come to Dubai to...
Yeah, there it is.
There's a challenge for one of the banks to...
PK has laid it down.
Yeah.
Can you pick that up?
Hello and welcome to this week's Taking Care of Business. This week I'm joined by Jess Stephenson. Hello.
Wow, full name.
Yeah.
What's that doing? Full named on these things?
You're not in trouble. This week we're going to be talking about data in the market. We do our data podcast once a month. The slight difference today is we're going to be looking at data for the first half of the year as opposed to a month-on-month basis. So, I'm laughing. The first question, or the first point on here is, it's worded as, who's the head of sales progression? But I think I'm supposed to introduce you as Jessica, who is the head of sales progression. So,
quite, yeah, in the flesh.
Yeah, here you are. Which leads me on to, we're going to put a twist on the data this month and talk about how sales progression has an influence in terms of the data, or what influence the data has on sales progression. It depends which way we look at it. So if we dive straight into it, the first half of this year, and this is land department data, so for the whole of the property market in Dubai, we saw, in terms of value of transactions in the market, 178 billion dirhams worth of property value transacted, which is an 18% increase compared to the second half of 2022, and year on year, 55.4% increase. To give you some volume information, that's a 12.4% increase versus the second half of last year, and a 42.3% increase year on year. So what does that mean to you?
Wow, some very busy sales progression team. I suppose what it ultimately means, the market is incredibly busy, which infiltrates down to our guys in sales progression. Because, I mean, when you're putting sort of figures together and we're looking at like sales data, until it actually comes down to somebody to progress the sale and transfer the sale, it's kind of just numbers that have been agreed, numbers on a board or sales that are agreed.
I believe you called yourselves cash converters earlier on.
Yeah, let's try not to coin that phrase. But it is though, isn't it? I always say it is kind of numbers on the board until it comes down to us. And then to actually make that into a transaction that happens. So whether that be a property that was sold or commission generated, it actually has to be at some point converted from. So for
anyone that doesn't know, can you briefly, 30-second synopsis on what sales progression is, what you guys do?
For cash converters, basically. No, I think that's a very different trade. So once the deal is signed, so the buyer and seller have actually agreed to purchase the property, and you've done all the exciting stuff. So you've been and done your viewings, and you've decided what property it is, you've gone through the negotiations, that's all done, and your contracts are signed. So at the point where you've got Unified Form F done, that's when it will come over to my department, and it's for us to then take it from that stage to actually changing the ownership on the title deed ultimately at the land department on the day of transfer. So it's managing that process. A bit of it, I feel, is quite a bit of project management and navigating the process and hopefully making it an enjoyable experience. If a financial and emotional transaction can ever be enjoyable, then we'll try and do that.
Good. And so with the volumes we've seen this year, I presume that must have brought I know, but for everyone else, what challenges has it brought to your team?
Well, because as you see, I mean, we're looking at, what was it, 55% up year on year. It's an absolutely enormous jump. It's not a few percent. So, and that's happened so quickly. I suppose it's trying to get ahead with the infrastructure in how you run a department, like what the department actually needs. And I know we're always expanding, but at the moment it has meant a complete overhaul and a restructuring of the department to make sure that we can actually handle this and get everything done to make sure the clients have a better experience really when we're getting through this, because they are astounding numbers to be able to cope with.
Yeah, and which is a crazy point to make. The market has risen so much and so quickly that we've had to completely restructure your department to deal with it.
Yeah, and as a business to do it, I mean, and to put the investment in there, because it's great that we have a marketing team and everything else that we do, but the back end of it also needs to work. So I suppose as a business, like, investing in that side of it is so important to make sure that they can still turn over. Because it is all agreed until it's done, and then we actually finalise the transaction.
So in terms of external factors, one I'm going to highlight, and there may be more that you add on additionally, but again, it's useful information for people to know. We've seen during the first half of the year quite, it's still not huge numbers, but a rise in the amount of devaluations of properties. You just explain to everyone what that is and what it can mean in a transaction and what possible solutions there are.
Yeah, so when you've agreed the price between the buyer and the seller, if you're buying with a mortgage, the bank will still want to value the property. So the bank will send an independent valuer. The buyer will pay for it, but the bank will send the valuer over. And it's really just an exercise in the bank making sure that they're lending the right amount on the property. So they don't want to lend too much if the property's not worth it, in their opinion. So that it's really like a bank kind of covering exercise. So the valuer will go round, and because the market, I mean, this is what I think has happened, because the market has jumped so quickly, the data isn't there yet to actually show that this is what the market is at now. So because the properties are being sold for a higher amount, but there isn't necessarily transacted data to support it, then you might have a down valuation. We're not talking about huge numbers when we say down valuation. I wouldn't say anything really more than 10% of what's agreed. But we're not talking about a massive number of cases either. But what it could mean to a buyer is that you might have to actually pay more in terms of your down payment towards the property. So if you were taking a mortgage at 80% loan to value, your 20% may increase. It'll still be 20%, but the price that actually is might be more if the bank down value the property. Might have to just contribute a bit more to it.
So to add a bit further, because we've said it a few times on the podcast in the past, what we find is the market is typically 3 to 5 months ahead of data that comes out of the land department. These independent valuers that go out, they have to base their evidence on information from the land department. But through no fault of anyone's, that information is 3 to 5 months old. So maybe if we sold something 4 months ago for 2.9, the way the market is now, we might sell it for 3 million. But the person that goes out only has evidence of a property value up to 2.9, and they can't justify on paper a higher price than that. So, like you say, it's interesting to highlight, because probably most people don't know that happens in the market, or that's a thing, or that happens in a rising market, which is what we're in. As you say, it doesn't happen in a lot of cases, but it's just one to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay,
to keep an eye out for.
Let's dive into some more data and see if that carries on or marries up with what you guys are seeing from what Allsopp and Allsopp do. So off-plan versus secondary for the first half of the year, there was 30,650 off-plan transactions in Dubai. In the secondary market, there was 30,516 transactions, so almost neck and neck, really, in terms of the data.
There we are. That's sign of the times.
Yeah. In value, though, which perhaps quite interesting for you, the value of off-plan transactions was 70.7 billion. The value of secondary transactions, 107 billion. So 37 billion more, 37 billion dirhams. It's that big, I can't even say it. More value in the secondary market.
Let's go for that. A lot more.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
It speaks to the type of properties that are selling, which are at the higher end of the market.
And I think as well, like you see a lot of the headlines, don't you, on the off-plan market, like the big sort of headlines that go kind of viral on Instagram and stuff are off-plan generally, properties that are being sold off-plan for those huge numbers. But people also like to see bricks and mortar, and they like to, you know, see a house that's ready. So yeah, interesting.
And I think just more people are making a home in Dubai as well. So more people
100%.
are setting up the longer term futures here, and again, maybe splashing out a little bit more on a property here, and instead of saving the money to go home with.
$30 billion splashing out a bit
30
more.
billion trillion.
Splashed out a bit there.
Okay, and then property type breakdown, which is also quite interesting. So for the first half of the year, apartments made up 45,131 transactions, villa townhouses 11,662, and then we always have another category which thinks more like retail, warehouses, etc., just over 4,000. So apartment living 4 times the size of villa transactions, really. And I know we're talking off camera, you're very much an apartment girl yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So at least there's 40,000 other people that get it. I mean, the obvious one is, of course, they're smaller, so you can build more of them. But yeah, I think Dubai, a lot more people are looking, I think, at apartments from this data anyway. But I'm definitely an apartment person. I love the apartment life.
Good. Then something you will know quite a bit about for us, mortgages, because obviously part of the sales progression process, you will deal with the banks and mortgage brokers. We've got our own in-house mortgage team, but then external ones as well. So mortgage transactions in the first half of the year, they're 30.4% up on H2 2022, and almost the same actually, 30.3% increase versus year on year H1 2022. So an enormous amount more people taking mortgages than we've ever seen before as well.
Why use your own money? Use the banks. Why not? Keep your cash.
It's true. It's the view I support.
Yeah, but I suppose, but as well, it is people getting into the market. I think it's positive because I think that tells you that they're more end user. That's what it tells. It tells me rather than cash investors. I think that gives me like more confidence, I would say, because I think if it's the type of end user that needs to get a mortgage, I think there are people that tend to want to stay in Dubai and maybe building a life. That's a massive generalization, but I think that's the trend and the pattern in terms of what is happening in the market. So so talk about mortgage and cash buyers. How does that impact bringing it back to sales progression, a sales progression process? Mortgage buyers, it's going to take a lot longer than if you are a cash buyer and your funds are ready. Saying that though, not always is if you have a cash buyer, the cash isn't always ready. Maybe they need to liquidate shares or get it out of a trust or wherever their money is tied up. It might not always be as instant as you think. But with finance buyers, for sure, I mean, we've got a mortgage process to go through on the front end. So that would be the buyer getting pre-approval. I think it's so important to get a pre-approval before you're going out looking. You don't have to, but I just, that's where you're going to get a guideline of how much you can actually afford and how much you can negotiate to. So I think as well with interest rates, I think people's affordability is lower than maybe it was like last year or 18 months ago. So you might think that you can afford to maybe look up to 4 million, but I don't know, I'm just plucking this out of the air. Maybe you're actually closer to 3. So I think it's really important to get an idea before you start looking. But I mean, it's not something that's essential, but I think it's an important factor. And then, I mean, you'll go through your bank valuation and move forward to final offer letter. I think getting through the mortgage process, even if you're the most enthusiastic buyer, because people do have like full-time jobs and everything else that's so demanding, it is almost like another job applying for a mortgage. Getting all your bank statements and like, it sounds such minimal work, but you've really got to sit down and like download everything, get the authenticated stuff. Maybe you need to like close a credit card. Like it can be quite arduous.
Sometimes you need to go into the bank. There's reams of paperwork to fill out.
So I think, even if you are like really wanting to get something done quickly, you need to be like really committed to getting your mortgage in place. It does add some time on. How long, it's really, really subjective, but definitely will be a few weeks.
Hard
versus
to say.
A cash buyer.
Okay, looking into some Allsopp and Allsopp data, still on the sales side of things. The average sale price in the first half of the year was 3.617. Now, I remember a couple of years ago, I think the average sale price was 2.3 to 2.4.
Yeah.
So it really speaks for how the market has shifted over the last couple of years. Buyer nationalities is always one we get asked about. So our top 5 buyer nationalities for the first half of the year, 23% buyers were Brits, Indians in second place, Russians in third, which is no surprise to anyone really, Turkish nationality in fourth place, and French, which is always really in our top 5 in joint, I was going to say fifth place, but joint fourth place. Looking forward to what we might see in the second half of the year, I always look at demand that we see and people registering as buyers with Allsopp and Allsopp. So the first half of this year, we saw an 83.9% increase in buyers registering with us compared to the second half of last year. Year on year, 57.6% increase.
It's absolutely massive. I mean, that must be like everybody is looking to buy in Dubai. There's so many people, I think, moving out of the rental market as well. So anybody that's been here maybe, I don't know, a couple of years, 3-4 years, they've seen the rental prices rise so much. They might have had a chance to save a deposit in that time. So yeah, it makes sense for people to be getting on the ladder. And I think that feeds back into the data with how many people are looking at mortgages.
100%.
Just getting out of that.
Yeah. And then overseas investors as well, which actually leads me on to another interesting question. How can someone who wants to invest in Dubai but doesn't live and reside in Dubai, and it might not be a simple answer, how can they buy a property in Dubai?
You can. There's a couple of ways of doing it. You can buy a property off plan directly from a developer, and you can send over like your installments directly to the developer. Where it gets a little bit tricky is if you are overseas, you wanted to invest here and you're buying a property from an end user, so somebody that is not an end user, sorry, so a ready property, so something that's built and you're buying it from an individual, you'll need some way of getting a manager's cheque. And that comes down to whether you have a bank account in Dubai, or if you have somebody who can prepare a manager's cheque for you. Maybe you've got a relative or somebody here that could do that, because the method of payment on transfer is still by manager's cheque for a property that is a ready property.
Okay, so if you know someone here that you trust very well, they can do it. To open a bank account, what would someone have to do? Fly into Dubai?
They would, yeah. And it's a tricky one to answer because there's so much bank compliance to go through to actually successfully open a bank account. But you would have to be in person in the bank applying. They say like 10 days if everything is perfect. We all know that there's always going to be a document that isn't perfect and that they're going to push back and ask for some more stuff. So it can be a difficult process to open a bank account.
And does the person have to be here for 10 days, or can they fly in, start the process?
They do need to be here, yeah.
Wow, really?
Because they want them there for account opening. It's a lot of compliance. I mean, the Dubai's changed so much in the last couple of years in terms of compliance, but that's another aspect to it. Banks holding non-res accounts, they don't seem to really want to do it.
Okay, so the message is, if you want to invest in Dubai, come and have a lovely holiday.
Come have a nice holiday.
Set your bank accounts up and
yes.
And then what happens from there? Because I know there's lots of power of attorney services in the market. We have our own power of attorney service. So at what stage can someone leave a power of attorney with someone, fly off, and never have to come back again?
Well, the power of attorney stuff is amazingly simple now because it's remote POA. And what I found yesterday, the data on the power of attorneys that we're doing, it was like 87% of people that give a POA that we've done over the last 6 months weren't even here. So they actually did it remotely.
So they did the POA remotely?
Exactly.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, so you don't need to come here, give the POA at the court. We can do that, but I mean, why waste a day when you could be on the beach?
Yeah.
So you might as well you can give it while you're overseas. I honestly think that the UAE is the only place that you can do that. Remote power of attorney is absolutely amazing service from the notaries here.
So maybe it might be out of place for me to say, but if the banks could maybe follow suit and allow remote bank account opening, then somebody wouldn't have to come to Dubai to...
Yeah, there it is.
There's a challenge for one of the banks to...
PK has laid it down. Yeah. Can you pick that up?
Okay, some more interesting information. Villa townhouse sale prices has shot up 3.7% from the second half of last year and 10.4% year on year. So the average price now with this is Allsopp and Allsopp data is 5.629 million. A couple of notable transactions on the Palm and Al Barari. And average apartment price is 2.041 million dirhams, which is up 6% on the second half of last year, which is actually the average apartment sales price is now creeping up on what the average general market price was previously.
Yeah, I think it's probably more in line though with getting there with the rest of the world though, isn't it? I mean, they're quite big apartments. You know, we're not talking about a kind of flat that you'll get in London for that price. Like you're talking about, you know, 1,000 square feet, like really decent compared to the rest of the world. So yeah, I think it's fair that it's probably, in my opinion, I think it's been lagging. So I think it's fair that they start.
I agree. And I know our managing director, Mark Walters, is on exactly the same wavelength as that. Okay, I'm going to take you into some more unfamiliar territory, which is lettings.
Could be interesting. Anything could happen here. Please stay tuned.
So the average lettings price in the first half of the year, again, this is Allsopp and Allsopp data, was 192,000 dirhams, which is up 10% on the second half of last year and up 22.6% on the first half of last year. So that rental market that we keep talking about, which is probably driving buyers and driving everything else, is currently showing no sign of letting up.
That is really high rent, isn't it? There's no two ways about that. Do we have what kind of properties are averagely renting?
What, in terms of apartments and villa townhouses? Good question. We will do. Average villa townhouse letting price, wait for this one, is 336,000 dirhams.
It is staggering, really, isn't it? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Well, it's no surprise it's driving as soon as people can, it's driving the purchasing market. And the average apartment let is 133,000 dirhams, which is also a lot, to be fair, because I know I'm sounding like an old timer, but I used to rent a big 2-bedroom in the marina for I think 65.
Yeah, I know.
In a nice building as well. So it's
had really random different prices while I've rented over the years here, but that is high. Yeah,
and I think on the back of there's headlines out last week, the population increased by 50,000 in the first half of this year.
Yeah.
If I tell you some tenant registration figures, this is tenants registering with us to look for a property. We're 68% up in terms of tenants coming to us looking for property on the second half of last year, and we're 80% up on the first half of last year.
Yeah, it's not surprising at all though, people moving here. I think everybody that I speak to, they've got a friend of a friend or somebody that's moving over. A few of my friends have even moved over, and people are doing it at different stages in their lives as well now. I think people are, even if they've got families, they're thinking, yeah, let's do it, you know, and I think it's to take that leap when you're really settled into your life. Dubai's obviously got to be offering something good. So
yeah, and I think it does, but I think social media's helped hugely with this over the last 2 or 3 years, because like when we both moved over, Dubai was more unknown, and the reason it was unknown is because there wasn't social media.
I was laughing at this
TV
the other day. There was no Google Maps. I genuinely had an actual map in my car. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. But it's true. But the world's changed so much now that people feel they know Dubai before even coming here, because you do see so much and you can do so much research and watch so many videos, and it does just enhance the popularity massively. Checks is always something that's an interesting one to look at. So 35% of rental transactions with us are done with a one check payment.
Wow.
I know, which again, going back a couple of years, we were probably at 22%. So it seemed at one point like the one check payments were being phased out of the market. I think, if I'm honest, it speaks to a lot of cash that is coming into Dubai at the moment from other areas around the world. There's a lot of wealth coming in, whether it be from the UK, from the US, from Europe, from Hong Kong, where the financial situation's changed. So top 5 tenant nationalities. Again, people always are. My personal view on nationalities, I'm a bit over it, but people always like to know about nationalities.
True.
So Brits number 1, Russians in second place, Indians third, French in fourth, and Lebanese in fifth place. Okay, what else have I got here that you might like to hear about? Average developer sales price. Can you guess what that is? Were you looking at my screens?
It's a bit awkward, this. Average developer sales price. I think this is going to be quite inflated because I think there's been some mega
mega off-plan sales, but I could be wrong.
Well, it's 4.107 million.
Could never have guessed that.
Which is, I think you're right. It is with the higher price transactions, because traditionally you would think developer sales would be more made up of, and especially over recent years, where at the moment we're seeing a lot of handovers of more affordable living communities. So 2 or 3 years ago, they were being sold off plan. So this price would have been a lot lower, and studios and 1 beds and 2 beds making it up. So I think you're spot on there in terms of what is. Although maybe 4 million doesn't sound an inflated price, it probably is for maybe where we were 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, and as these developments come up, that's when they tend to be, it seems to be like a real sweet spot of when they're coming up to handover, that's when people start to sell them. And it's all of the end users that probably were looking at them off plan 4 years ago thinking, oh, I quite like those. And then actually they've come to it and they've ended up paying a premium on the project anyway. But people do still have some comfort when they see something's ready, I think.
This could be a separate podcast, but how easy is it to resell an off-plan unit?
Yeah, it's pretty easy, to be honest. It's like anything, it's a process, isn't it? But the process is relatively like solidified. Like everybody knows what they're doing with the developers, and they have what they call the DSR, Developer Service Register. So sometimes it'll be through the trustee, sometimes you'll do it directly with the developer. It only is a little bit tricky when you're changing over ownership documents. So you'll go from something called an ACUD, the initial contract of sale, when it's actually off plan. When it gets to a certain point in construction, pretty much near finished, all finished, it'll change to a pre-title deed. And changing that over, that's probably the only kind of thing you've maybe got to wait for from the developer.
It sounds to me a little bit like it's one of those things that's easy when you know how.
Well, most things are really, aren't they?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
very true. But I think even when you're saying that to me, I don't know that full process.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, how does that work?
I just went through it myself, actually. I took handover of a unit, and the DSR did take ages. It took about 2 months to get the DSR active.
Wow.
But that wasn't from the developer or land department. It's just one of those things that took some time. But all a process.
Yeah, it's what we love in this place, boring as they are. Okay, we've got a couple of stats to finish and to round up with. So some trends or some patterns that we might be seeing happening. Something that's we've labelled premium city living, which is it seems to be apartments in premium areas, look like they've risen by 10 to 12%. When I say risen, in terms of the average sale price in the first half of the year. Established villa communities, the examples I've got here in front of me are like, for example, Emirates Living or Arabian Ranches, have risen by 8 to 12% on average over the first 6 months of the year. So really the two numbers, 8 to 12, 10 to 11, they're kind of in line with each other, really.
Yeah.
Villa communities such as Dubai Hills, 10.4%. So again, we seem to be within an 8 to 12% rise in market prices. Apart from one I'm going to pick out, and I know that you noticed this before as well, Jumeirah Islands, 21.6% increase.
Yeah.
And what do you think the reason is for that?
Well, I think I've seen some unbelievable refurbs in Jumeirah Islands. There's some serious refurbishments have gone on there, and I think that's probably got something to do with it, because people have done stunning stuff with those villas. So I've got a feeling that might have something to do with it. But also I think the same with even, I know they're all around like the 10%, but even the like the established villa communities, Emirates Living, the locations are still amazing, but people I think are starting to do them up.
100%. And for anyone watching, if you drive through any villa community, it almost feels like on every street there's work going on. You've got the scaffolding up, or the metal fences around the property. Things are being knocked down. Things are being rebuilt. So I think that's only going to be a trend that continues over the next decade or more.
It's exciting.
It is exciting.
More personalised properties.
Exactly, and it does add a lot of value.
Yeah,
it seems to
massively. 21% apparently in Jumeirah Islands.
Yeah,
that much value.
There you go. Yeah. Two other areas that have caught our eye: JVT and JVC villas. JVT saw on average 13% price increase, and JVC just under 10%. What do you think? And I may have been putting you on the spot. I don't know how well you know those areas, but why do you think they're such popular areas for people?
Well, I think they might have been overlooked, to be honest, for the last few years, because both of those locations are unbelievable. Like, they are literally in the middle of Dubai.
Yeah.
So I think they might have actually just been being overlooked. And then as the market's just become, you know, such the beast that it is, those areas have then got a chance to go, well, actually, hang on, we haven't really looked at JVC or JVT, like that works. So I think it might have just been as the rest of the market's risen, that's pulled up areas that were being a bit overlooked, but I think the location's great.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and the road, it sounds boring again, but the road network in and out is really easy. Like, they're really accessible.
Build in Dubai. Put to work. Have you seen the new road over Al Khail?
I'm going to leave before I bore everyone to death on processes and road networks.
As well.
Yeah,
That's
more interesting for people.
A little bit more interesting than the new flyover on Al Khail.
Good. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed watching. Hope I've not bored you too much. As always, please like, follow, leave any questions. We'll have our first half or H1 report out in the next couple of days. It'll be in the media, it'll be on our website for you to take a look at. And like I say, any comments or questions, welcome.